Okay, once again, welcome to my workshop, of which we have roughly 40 minutes left, which is fine. So it's no worries. It's technology things. All right, so the workshop that we have today to do with you is quality control or teacher development, and the essential aspect within it is about reflective teaching observations. My name's Hasan Shikoh. I'm operating right now from Birmingham. I live and work here at the University of Birmingham. Let's proceed to the main stuff that we have here, reflective write or warm up. Now, I've got these three questions for you. How many people have conducted an official lesson observation? And how many people have officially been observed while teaching? And how many people enjoyed the experience of observing or being observed? And the core thing that I want to understand is why, if you enjoyed or did not enjoy either of the two uh, aspects. If you could give your responses in the YouTube um, stream or the comments box, please. And Chris will help me to know what the audience is saying. And when I'm looking on the site here, I've got another computer I'm setting up as a double screen. So I'm not looking away from the audience. I'm just looking at another computer for a second.
I think they're feeling a bit shy at the moment.
Okay. Okay. So Chris, then when the sound wasn't going through to the audience in the first instance when I started, Chris did say that he enjoys it. Chris, do you want to repeat what you said? I just let it have it from you.
Sure. Oh, here we go. So we've got some comments coming in. So what one comment is saying is that they enjoyed it when the observer joins in with the lesson or joins in with the conversation during the class.
Okay, brilliant. Somebody else, and any other comment there?
None at the moment, but people are starting to interact. They're happy they can hear you, so this is good. They want to hear what you're saying. Perhaps just a bit hesitant to offer their own opinions.
Okay, okay. There, I would like to ask this question as well. Key observation types. What would you say are the key observation types that there are up there in the world? This is a question for the audience, and if, again, Chris be my backup one-man audience, that would be fine as well.
Of course. Okay, well, I'll start. So, audience at home, while you're preparing your answers, I'll feed in some of mine. But yeah, please give your contributions. So, when we think of observation types, we can think of more for professional development in terms of teaching practice. So maybe what you could be doing better. So identifying your areas of strengths and weaknesses for sure. Then there's the idea of quality control. So maybe are you towing the line of the school? Maybe the school has a certain way of doing things. They want to see that you are measuring up to their expectations or delivering lessons in a way that they expect or see fit.
Okay, thank you. Now, these are the three that I have. In essence, we have the demo lesson as well. We can have where people want to be recruited and the management might ask them to present a demo lesson for them to observe. Then there is also the peer observation whereby it's more informal and people would want to pick up tips from their colleagues. The very much more formal and documented for eternity is the quality control observation system. So we have these three types of key observation in essence. Now, let's have a look or an overview of what I'm going to cover in this workshop. The situation, main purpose, and key stakeholders of teaching observations. Now, this is the situation we faced. I'll try to reduce the time we spend on this now because of the paucity of time. The problems are there are limited benefits, which is one of the reasons why many teachers out there, um, be they experienced or less experienced ones, after a certain bad experience, they tend to find that observations might have limited benefits. And then it also may be a situation where there is a lose-lose scenario. Now, what's the solution for that? When in 2012 we at the University of Birmingham we introduced a new system to solve this problem that both managers and teachers were experiencing in terms of the experience of being observed or observing. So we came up with a pioneering system, and we'll talk about that soon. The evaluation then, the assessment of suitability for local settings. If at all we are left with time, I'd ask you to do that for your local settings. Now, in terms of the situation, there is the purpose and stakeholders teaching observations. If you could quickly identify the main purpose or benefits of quality control teaching observations and the key stakeholders of the observation system, who would those be in your mind, in your experience?
We're having some issues with the slides. The text as it's appearing on YouTube is very blurry, as though you've taken your glasses off and are trying to stare at it. Bizarrely, it's fine on my screen, but we're getting some comments from others that's a bit blurry. I think we'll be okay with this, so long as if you could just repeat some of the main points of the text on the screen, and then I think we'll be able to get through this. So if I could ask you one more time, please, Hasan, if you could just read points A and B and repeat the question for the YouTube audience.
Okay, now we have a situation which is the purpose and stakeholders of teaching observations. Let's identify the main purpose or benefits of quality control teaching observations and the key stakeholders of the observation system. Right. If you got anything to share, please do feel free to write it on the YouTube comments box. I now have access to it. The text is fine on the YouTube screen for me, one of the participants is saying. Anyway, so if you got any response you got for this slide, please feel free to write on the chat box. I have now access in YouTube for the same. Right. Nobody seems to be writing, so let's proceed. Now, here are the possible answers for the situation. The main purpose of benefits of teaching observation at institutional, departmental, or program level. The other main purpose of benefit is teacher support and CPD, continuous professional development. Parity for the European credit transfer system or some such in your parts of the world, obviously not just for the European one. It could be for something, say, in the Far East, in the subcontinent, in Africa, continent of Africa, and what have you. A correlation of results for course and or teaching evaluations. And now, the second part of my question, the key stakeholders of the observation system are educational institutions, the accreditors, program directors, and teachers. Now, bearing this in mind, we now need to look at the following. What are the problems? Here is a question that I have for you. What problems might commonly be associated with teaching observations acting as obstacles to their success?
While the others are thinking about that, there's one that keeps coming up for me as well. Again, not so much as I've become older and more experienced, but the idea that often an observation is just a snapshot. Often they happen just once. maybe once an academic year, once a semester or a term. And we are only human. We can have good days and bad days. And the idea that your teaching performance can be based off of just one observation possibly doesn't give a true picture of what is really happening in the classroom.
Sure. Sure. Yep. Thank you. You feel controlled. Somebody, and I'm not going to be naming names for two reasons. One, for privacy. Second, I mean, I know the names there, but I'm not going to pronounce. Second, for pronunciation. I don't want to end up making somebody feel bad their name was pronounced incorrectly. So one of the persons there has said that they feel controlled. That's absolutely true. And if I wish we had a physical interactive situation, I could have asked you what makes you feel controlled, unless you're able to type that in very quickly. So in the meantime, if and while you do that, let's look at possible answers. Possible, some managers, observers are clueless. Okay, yep, that's absolutely true. This is what I've got. So teachers' anxiety and stress. Uh, Lesson observations or observed lessons are showcase lessons. They're not often the real deal or the natural deal, really. Limited or no opportunities for true professional development, incompetent or inexperienced managers. And I think that's one of the reasons why uh, either the managers project that they are the ones who are coming from a position of knowledge and experience or superior experience, and so what they will say is what is gospel. um, so in that way they might feel they're controlling and the observer feels they're being controlled. One of the participants has written answers, read possible solutions. Some managers, observers are clueless. Now, you bet. Many a manager has made it to their position, yeah, by dint of their capability. Yes, but for some, I would say that they were just there at the right time in the right place, but they may not be the right person. And those are the kind of people who create a lot of anxiety for their observees, because they want to keep their job, their positions, and they want to prove every time, all the time, who they are, what they are. All right, prescriptive, egotistical, or judgmental assessment by observers. Now, this could come from experienced ones as well, or those who are good managers, who've been good teachers and gone into the management positions, but they can be prescriptive as well or judgmental, as if what they will tell is the best or what they will suggest is the ultimate. And this is what leads to observee dissatisfaction, which then consequently leads to stress. Because, like Chris has just said, they can be a snapshot. They could be stuff coming from the previous lessons into this observed lesson, and some of what's being taught in the class could be covered later on as well. But that snapshot may not be maybe insufficient to pass a judgment for the rest of the 6 months or 12 months before the next observation. Sometimes tick box activity for all to satisfy regulations. This often happens in situations where educational institutions or language centers, if because we're in that context, and I'm not pointing at Masaryk, I've never been there in physical terms, but instances where you've got language centers become a shop. So the more customers they have, or clients they have, the better, and that means more teachers, and that means more observations to do, and then that means, yeah, let's take something for the British Council or some such quality control body to say we've done the observations, but did we do them right? Remains a question. Now, because of this situation, we came up with the following solution. We decided we need to look at the teaching and not the teacher. And in detail, the teaching observation, reflective teaching observation, and the factors that involve whether it's a dual purpose, it's both quality control and teacher development. It's two-pronged. And then this was developed by ourselves. The BME is the Business Management English Pre-Sessional Program. that is being offered at the University of Birmingham. Uh, for it's been ages, but we pioneered, not myself, but the team of four that we had. Our director then at that time had asked one of our team members, management team, to develop a solution to this, and he came up with Mike Laughlin. He came up with the reflective teaching observation system, which then we all worked together to develop. Now, at that time, apparently nobody else was using it or had introduced it, and the British Council inspectors who came and observed and did the quality control checks and what have you, they discovered us doing this and they said this was pioneering. I obviously now understand that other universities and language centers are doing the reflective systems of observation as well. I shared with universities internationally through higher education conferences, for example, this one. Now, the reflective teaching observations, the benefits were, we thought and we realized were as follows. There's shared ownership and responsibility. There's experiential learning through reflection by the practitioner. Now, how is it shared ownership and responsibility? I'll talk about this in detail as I go on to one of my later slides. So just bear that in mind that the elaboration for that is coming. Experiential learning through reflection by the practitioner. This will be explained very soon as well. Now, it's a two-way learning process. This couldn't be truer. This could not be truer. When I have observed, been in the business of it for a few years now, um, whenever I have gone into an observation class, it's not to observe really, but actually to learn from, if I can pick up a few things from the person I'm observing. And that kind of attitude that sort of was ingrained in me really helped me uh, uh, enjoy my job of observing because I was actually ending up learning things if I could. And then obviously you share things with the observee too. But how do you share? It's by way of making them reflect. And by that way, they realize how they perform what they've done. And so then that makes it more of a benefit, a positive feeling that the observee goes away with. Support avenues for new teachers. Again, uh, once I tell you how we go about doing the reflective teaching observation, particularly new teachers, for example, they can be very anxious like anybody else, but particularly more so in their case because they're new, and they would uh, come up with often basic but pertinent issues that they feel about themselves. So that can help this two-way trustworthy relationship that one needs to develop as an observer with the observee helps the new ones to really grow pretty fast. I assure you. I think it's been 10 years now I've been doing this teaching observation, but been in the teaching profession now for 23 years. Opportunities to select practitioners with promotion and or delivery of CPD workshops. Once as an observer, you find that somebody has been able to teach well and that they have been able to reflect well. It sounds like they can share their thoughts with others as well if they're the process of delivery and talk and teach. So that's a good opportunity to help grow your team as well into other teacher development courses or programs within the program you are working. Uh, it's obviously a record for HR department and future accreditors. Now, this is what happens. Reflective teaching observations. Let's talk about the logistics. Each teacher is observed once annually or during their sessional engagement. Now, you can see an asterisk. By that we mean, or I mean here, unless the observation raises concerns and requires a follow-up observation. Otherwise, the concept was that we do it just once a year. I understand from from a little bit of exchange I had about the Masaryk University. I understand that their people are observed. Is it twice a term or twice a year? But well, the concept we developed was meant to be done once a year, unless other things made it necessary. Now, QC observers, quality control observers, now that would be the management. Now that could include dean, head of department, program coordinators, observation date and lesson to be nominated by the teacher. Now this is where, if I can take you quickly back to this aspect here, shared ownership and responsibility. So you give it to the teacher to decide when they would like to be observed, rather than you coming in and saying, I'm observing on that particular day. Not sure it happens anymore, but you never know with some institutions out there in the world that the people who managers come with that kind of I'm in control style. Okay, there are no more comments yet, so that's fine. Okay. Now, the observation date or lesson to be nominated. So there's the ownership and autonomy. Lesson plan is an optional thing, excluding teachers in the first year of their teaching practice, or teachers who joined an institution for the first time. So for them, it would be regarded as an instance where we at the BME or the University of Birmingham, we had the thought that we should have them prepare the lesson plan, but in the subsequent ones, not really necessary. However, teachers would still share their lesson plans, which is all fine anyway. Now, the reflective observation process is three parts. It's a three-part process. Pre-observation meeting or conversation is the observee is invited to have an optional pre-observation meeting. On occasions, it was optional, then it became mandatory. Then it really depends on if the observee really wants to have a pre-op. We would recommend that one should have a pre-observation meeting because it helps with a lot of things. Again, you will see that in due course. I have 19 minutes left. Now, pre-observation meeting, conversation, about 15-20 minutes. The observation would be about 50 minutes. The UK university or a class hour is 50 minutes and not 60 minutes. Post-observation meeting, this would be between 20 to 40 minutes, depending again on how much time it takes for the person's involved to reflect. At the end of it, written record is maintained through a jointly agreed observation report. Again, there is that factor of ownership and autonomy, which, to return to one of the delegates' comments here, they feel controlled. So in this reflective observation process, we gave the teachers the control as well. And on our, as a management team of 4 people, we were genuinely honest about it. We weren't pretending. Initially, we did experience people saying, "We don't still trust you," but some of them. But we had to, well, through our performance, convince them that it's a genuine process, and then you can't make everybody happy anyway. So never take that, Right now, solution. The purpose of the pre-observation meeting. Once you see the points here, you will see why it's highly recommended that an observee should have a pre-observation meeting, because it's an important step. Its purpose is to communicate the overall process, and that's an opportunity for the observee to, tell about the lesson, and for the observer about the observation process itself. To discuss the planned learning outcomes of this session. So this is an opportunity for the observee to fine-tune their lesson plan and plans of performance in the class, to determine the teaching strategies to be used to accomplish the outcomes, and to elicit any specific areas for feedback as requested by the teacher. Now, there could be perhaps no area for further development. A teacher may be all fine, which is perfectly fine, no problem. But there are instances where there may be a few where a teacher might require some kind of reflection on. And there are 2 options then. One, to help the teacher arrive at their requirements by way of reflection, and I'll show you how to ask those questions that we had a tough time coining, because it's quite interesting. They're very simple words and sentences, but then once you really get down to do these kind of things, and in the state of post observation meeting, you end up going back to your natural normal style, but you got to be careful, because otherwise it just falls apart if you're not careful in the way you're asking the teacher to reflect rather than telling them something. Right, so the teacher could be helped to arrive at the requirements by way of the questions that you ask. And the other thing is that the teacher could ask for a specific area they want to be given feedback on. And that again helps them achieve control over their observation. And then it's the observer is obliged, I'd say, to focus only on that in their direct feedback to the observee, rather than telling about five other issues that they might have. So tell about that one particular, so that allows the observee to have control. Right, now examples of where am I? Yeah, examples of pre-observation prompts. Now let's have a look at these. The questions asked by the observer to prompt pre-teaching reflection. What has been covered in your course syllabus for this class so far? Why have you chosen these learning outcomes for the lesson? Which teaching methods do you plan to use, and why? How do these methods compare to other courses you're teaching? How will you establish if the students have achieved your planned objectives? Are there any particular aspects of your teaching that you would like me to focus on? Are there any special points about the class or any student that I should be aware of? Now, you see, these are opportunities in the pre-observation meeting for the observee to tell, okay, the person's asked me this question, the observer's asked me this question about a particular student who gives me grief. Therefore, let me tell them in advance about what problems I would experience, or what particular person in the class makes me feel anxious, and therefore that does not make me do my job very well. So that's an opportunity, taking control. And then also, I would really like to talk about this one as well. Are there any particular aspects of teaching that you'd like me to focus on? Another instance where you are telling the person that you have concerns, all right, and that's also a method of you showing that you are reflective already about your profession or your work. Okay, now the teacher action after in the post observation. What the teacher does in the post observation is that they email their overall reflections to the observer within 24 to 48 hours of the observed lesson. Sometimes some people get carried away with having because of paucity of time and meetings and what have you. You know what, you just finished the lesson, let's talk. It's because you've not given the teacher the opportunity to reflect at all. And if they do reflect immediately after teaching, then it's too hot, and they're too emotionally attached to what they might have done. And so, you need the person psychologically to come away from it and return to their thoughts, memory of how and what they did from a cold angle, and then that could be more objective, we would think. Okay. Yep, there you are. Okay. One of the other reasons why we would want a teacher to come back with the reflections in approximately 24 to 48 hours is because you don't want to influence their thought process. You don't want to influence their reflection straight away. It has to be an original, organic, independent process. Again, control given to the observer, and to come out with it in an honest way. Now, often this is helpful because often when somebody else tells you something about you, it really hurts. But if the teacher observee themselves come up and say, you know what, I don't think I did that one as a good job, then it's easier for the observer as well to not disagree with that if that has been the case. Often, on the other hand, teachers or observees are way too harsh on themselves, and you as the observer say, well, I wasn't thinking of that, nor did I see it that way. I think you did a perfectly fine job. So it really helps in that way. It makes it easy for the observer too, once you really had the good practice doing this. Okay, let's proceed now to the timing and purpose of the post-observation meeting. It's scheduled 24, like I've said, is to discuss the teacher's reflections, to review the lesson, to solve the problems that they might have where necessary. In addition to this, is to set future goals. Now, people in the team did say that 70% or more of the talking time should be given to the teacher for reflection. Absolutely true. What I would like to say is the maximum possible time should be given to the teacher for reflection, because I don't know how to measure 70%. What if it's a 60%, 40% ratio in the end? I mean, how do you measure this? So, you don't want to be as an observer and as a manager, you don't want to pressure your team members into that kind of nitty gritty of 70%, not 72%. So I would just say a maximum possible time must be given for the teacher to, or the observee to talk rather than for yourself. I could, if I had sufficient time, I would have given you an example of how somebody messed up an observation. The person had to go off on a stress leave for 4 months because of the way the observer returned to the observee. It was just horrible. But I don't have time for that now. All right, post-observation prompt now. Fortunately, we don't have time again for this. What post-observation questions can be posed by the observer to the writer in order to aid reflection. I don't have time for you to do the reflective discussion on this. So I would just say to you, you set the climate first. To what extent do you feel your students were productively engaged in the lesson? You could ask that question. Further review, how successful were you in achieving your objectives? How did you measure this? How will this help you in your future teaching practice? And what do you think about the suitability of the materials you use? Now, obviously, there may be prescribed materials, and that's an opportunity for you to say, if you're not happy with them, that you use them because you had to. You could tell, well, this is how I never was positive about them. Or you might have come up with yours that are new. And again, it's an opportunity for you to say, well, you shared them for the first time, used them for the second time, you're still piloting them, etc. So it becomes a positive conversation rather than an explanatory one, because you're reflective. It's a conversation, not an interrogation. Now, on reflection, what in this lesson would you say was your teaching strength? Problem-solving questions could be as follows. Looking back, is there anything that you would change and why? Goal-setting questions could be something like, did anything happen which you might use as an opportunity to develop your skills? And do you have any further or other reflections on the lesson? Tips for success, people, those who want to be observing, and those people who won't be observing but will be observed. You can, if you're brave enough, go tell your manager the following things. Communicate purpose with clarity, honesty, and transparency very much early on. One of the reasons why, as we all know, people get frustrated is because of lack of clear communication, which ends up making one feel there must be an agenda against me, which usually isn't the case. There are cases where it is the case. Now, generate trust and confidence, make the observation report forms available in advance. So when you're doing the pre-observation communication, make sure that the emails or whatever meetings that you have with the observee, you send them out the report forms as well, so they know what it entails, as well as the COP if you have them. COP being code of practice. Now, avoid prescriptive and judgmental approach. Very important for me, and I'm going to spend about 2 minutes on this. I know I haven't yet come to the forms. We're very conscious of time. Avoid prescriptive and judgmental approach. Now, you may have 40 years of experience, 50 years of teaching experience, but like Chris said at the onset, every teaching class situation is a particular snapshot, and it merits its own reactions and problem or solution responses. Now, for you or for anyone to come with a prescriptive approach that this is how it must have been done, the purpose of reflective post-observation meetings in particular is for the manager or the observer rather to understand the why of the choice the observee made. If that is viable, if that has value and quality to it and it's logical, accept it. You may have had 10 other solutions for that same problem that the teacher experienced and dealt with, but doesn't mean that the one that you're saying is the absolute. So I understand why a person might made a certain choice. Maybe in the context of their students, in the context of their particular class, that's what the solution is. Some students just won't talk. Now what to do? I could come up with 1,000 suggestions, but really, with that particular student body, that's how you perform. So be it. The other thing is, now, for the record, uh, people have got so obsessed with a communicative teaching method, you know, which is perfectly fine. But frankly speaking, when there was the traditional method, when there was the grammar translation method, were people not learning English in the classroom? A good majority of teachers still out there, still in active service, came from the 60s and 70s and 80s when these kinds of methods were prevalent and or favored, or they were just there. They're teaching today's English to today's people, our students. So did they not learn English back then? My point is, the other thing that they say about communicative language approach is to have, again, you know, that 70%, 90% teacher talk time, student talk time, and the teacher should be a facilitator and things like that. Really, wait a second. There is a time to tell, there is a time to show, and there is a time to let go. So when you're an observer, consider the situation. Maybe, for example, the students are being assigned to write a reflective essay. Many students don't know anything about it, so the teacher would need to tell them, they would need to instruct, spend some time talking to them about it. But you come away in your observation report and say, you were talking too much. But it merited the teacher talking too much, as it were. So what? So relax, don't come with that prescriptive approach. You weren't talking, you were talking. See the situation, let teachers be, encourage reflection as well. And one thing we strongly recommend moving on is to hold meetings away from the management office if possible. In England, it often rains a lot, but we still do it. No, okay. Manage time effectively, the whole process to be completed within 1 week maximum, so that everything is not too hot and not too cold. Keep accurate record of the report signed by both the parties, and the uh, the observee signs, returns to the observer signs, returns it to the observee. They've accepted. Thank you very much. The file is filed or archived. All right, now here's a sample report from the pilot observations at the Suleiman Demirel University in Kazakhstan. This is now we've sped further on into the future from 2012, for example, at the SDU in Kazakhstan. Uh, Reports were written for observers. Now, I want you to note that if you can, on your screens, if you can note that the italicized and bold are what I've written here, reflective prompts for the observee to read and learn from, rather than you directly telling them what was wrong, help them arrive at it if and as need be. So I'm going to read out for you for those of us who got vague display on the screens. Now, uses a variety of tasks. If it says here, student needs, uses a variety of tasks and materials to appropriate materials which are appropriate to the learner roles and styles. The whiteboard was used to display theories. Okay, now the person did use the whiteboard, and that's been written, and the students were informed about the problems that women faced in that particular lesson. Here is a reflective prompt or question. What might have been an alternative method of activating the schemata of the students, instead of saying, this is what else you could have done too? another point of reflective thought process of triggering that. When the Johari window model was displayed on the screen, you explained what it represented. Was there any, now, so there's the acknowledgement that this is what you did, but you're also asking by way of suggestion, but by way of asking a question, was there another way in which this could have been exploited for the benefit of the students? Very, I think, um, helpful reflective prompt. Now, sequences, let's proceed to the second part here, area number 2 in student autonomy. Sequences, a learning activity from guided to facilitated to autonomous. Now, for the first 10 minutes of the lesson, your students maintained silence or they did not ask questions. Reflection. How might the guided stage of lesson sequencing have been executed differently to enable student contribution? So there are several other as well. Again, I need to go further to share more with you in the time that I'm left with. In the student needs, encourages student reflection of own versus group role plus responsibilities in student reflection. In this form, the observer wrote the following comments. How might students in this lesson have been prompted to reflect on their learning, etc. Right. Now, I'd like us to, because I think I've got 5 minutes left now, and Masaryk said they're very strict about the timings. So I'll just show you now about the examples of teacher reflection. The teacher reflection on observed lesson in reference to future practice box is left here for the teachers to fill. And well, maybe we can see this at another time because I want us to do something else. Right. Post-pilot study observation report form for the STU. Now, after due process, and as we're always developing, we develop this further. This was fine-tuned for further accuracy as best we could humanly possible. Of course, people can have suggestions about this as well. What I'm going to ask you to do is evaluate to what extent could reflective teaching observations be successfully adopted in your academic institution. What I would like you to do is think of this question while I put this on display as well for you to help you reflect on the, for you to use this to reflect. Okay. So I'm going to put the question back on again and then return to this particular slide. To what extent, I've got 3 minutes left, to what extent could reflective teaching observations, and recall the word is not teacher observation, it's teaching. So you're focused on the teaching, not the person, be successfully adopted in your academic institutions. If you could look at that and bear this in mind. I'd encourage you to write your comments on the chat box on YouTube, please. Right, somebody's written, I would really like the opportunity to use this method of reflective teaching observations if our management are willing to adopt it and use it effectively. Why would they not be willing to adopt it and use it effectively? Why do you think they wouldn't? Okay, the response is that this means a loss of control for some managers and too much autonomy for teachers. So what if the managers lose control? What's wrong with it? Sorry, I'm just asking this as critical thinking questions. I agree with you, but some observers, managers, controlling and insecure. So you are hereby reflecting, maybe from personal experience or observed experience, that there are managers out there who mess up observations, therefore make the observation process, allow me to use this word, an ugly experience. And which is why people are, anxious and they feel stressed about it. Really, one needs to be not egotistical. If you've been given a position of power, it doesn't mean now that you, no, let me rephrase, not position of power. I don't like that word. If you've been given a position where you have more responsibility than the rest of the staff, give me one word for that, manager. um, well, it's not, that doesn't mean that you know everything, or that doesn't mean that you are the know-all and be-all. You can still go wrong, and it's okay. You got to be able to be brave to take it on your chin, and yeah, surely learn from your subordinates, from your colleagues, from your um, observees, and very importantly, the characteristic of a sound observer or manager in this case would be to acknowledge what they've picked up from their colleagues. That's team building style. So okay, so okay, I don't know. It's 11:06, Chris. So, I mean, am I supposed to continue? Are there any questions that people have? Oh, just a second. Sorry, I feel inspired to invite a colleague in my lesson. Okay. Do you mean you feel inspired to invite as a result of this? Sorry, I didn't really understand that. Do you mean that you feel inspired as a result of this workshop? Or do you mean generally? Okay. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Yes, Chris, you were going to say something, please.
Only that I'm happy I'm not working at the same place as SB. I think it will be very easy based on what you've done there. It's very, very similar to a sort of observation program we have in place at the faculty I work at, and it would not be much of a stretch to sort of include other aspects that you've spoken about here. Yeah, that's just my final thought on that. But yeah, good. So, are there any more questions from YouTube before we go?
Thank you, Jolanta. I'm naming you because it's okay.
Sure.
Your name. Could you please share your slides with us? Yes, I could. I could. They are with SDU. I think they're going to put them up on their portals, and also I think they're going to let you have access to the. Chris, are the YouTube videos still going to be? Are they going to be permanent, or are you going to remove them?
So I understand they'll be made available afterwards.
Okay, so the slides can be the presentation, I'd say, can be looked at then again, revisited, and the slides are also going to be available on the portal.
Yeah, that's right. That's great. Well, thank you very much for your time and for putting up with various technical inadequacies. So I'll give you a clap, and I will assume everyone at home is as well. So,
thank you.
Thank you.